Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. This morning we are studying Psalm 36, and
Just write that down out of
like
everything.
our general custom, we are specifically thinking about what the emotional resonance of the psalm is. What is the spiritual use of this psalm? How might it affect us, and how might we use it if we were going to use this psalm as a prayer? We also will look at a couple of important phrases from the psalm and get deep into what they might mean and what they might mean theologically, whether how we connect to those phrases separately from the rest of the psalm. And on that same note, we'll look at the ways that Jewish liturgy has incorporated verses from this psalm into the Jewish liturgical canon. So we'll start, as we usually do, by reading the psalm out loud. Let me share my screen so that you can see it. Okay. All right. Psalm 36. Lamenatseach le'eved Adonai leDavid. Ne'um pesha larasha bekerev libi. Ein pachad Elohim leneged einav. Ki hechelik elav be'einav limtso avono lisno. Divrei piv aven umirma. Hadal lehaskil lehitiv. Aven yachshov al mishkavo. Yityatsev al derech lo tov. Ra lo yimas. Adonai b'hashamayim chastecha, emunatcha al ad shechakim. Tzidkatcha keharei el, mishpatecha tehom rabah. Adam uveima toshia Adonai. Ma yakar chastecha Elohim, uvnei Adam betzel knafecha yechesayun. Yirviyun mideshen beitecha, v'nachal adanecha tashkem. Kimcha mekor chaim, be'orecha nir'eh or. Mishoch chastecha liyodecha, v'tzidkatcha lishrei lev. Al tivoeni regel gava, v'yad rishaim al tinideni. Sham naflu po'alei aven, dochu velo yachlu kum. And some translations. Here's the old JPS translation. For the leader, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord. Transgression speaketh to the wicked, methinks. There is no fear of God before his eyes. For it flattereth him in his eyes until his iniquity be found, and he be hated. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise, to do good. He deviseth iniquity upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. Thy loving kindness, O Lord, is in the heavens. Thy faithfulness reacheth unto the skies. Thy righteousness is like the mighty mountains. Thy judgments are like the great deep. Man and beast thou preservest, O Lord. How precious is thy loving kindness, O God, and the children of men take refuge in the shadow of thy wings. They are abundantly satisfied with the fatness of thy house, and thou makest them drink of the river of thy pleasures. For with thee is the fountain of life. In thy light do we see light. O continue thy loving kindness unto them that know thee, and thy righteousness to the upright in heart. Let not the foot of pride overtake me, and let not the hand of the wicked drive me away. There are the workers of iniquity fallen. They are thrust down and are not able to rise. Here's Rabbi Richard Levy's translation. For the conductor, for the servant of Adonai, for David. Rebellion speaks to the wicked, my heart thinks, is in my heart. There is no fear of God before their eyes. For they smooth it over in their eyes, lest they find themselves hating their crookedness. The words of their mouths are iniquity and deceit. They have stopped being wise, doing good. They plot sinful schemes upon their couch, position themselves on a no good path. Wickedness they do not spurn. Adonai, your covenantal love is in the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Your justice is like the mountains that are as lofty as God. Your judgments are the great deep. You preserve humans and animals, Adonai. How precious is your covenantal love, O God. Human beings take refuge in the shade of your wings. They overflow with the rich oils of your house. You water them with the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. Through your light we see light. Draw out the love of your covenant for those who know you, and your justice for the upright of heart. Let not the foot of arrogance escort me, nor the hand of the wicked send me away. Over there have the wrongdoers fallen, thrust down. They cannot rise. And we'll do the contemporary English version. For the music leader by David, the Lord's servant. This psalm is about human sin and God's goodness. Sinners don't respect God. Sin is all they think about. They like themselves too much to hate their own sins or even to see them. They tell deceitful lies, and they don't have the sense to live right. Those people stay awake, thinking up mischief, and they follow the wrong road, refusing to turn from sin. Your love is faithful, Lord, and even the clouds in the sky can depend on you. Your decisions are always fair. They are firm like mountains, deep like the sea, and all people and animals are under your care. Your love is a treasure, and everyone finds shelter in the shadow of your wings. You give your guests a feast in your house, and you serve a tasty drink that flows like a river. The life-giving fountain belongs to you, and your light gives light to each of us. Our Lord, keep showing love to everyone who knows you, and use your power to save all whose thoughts please you. Don't let those proud and merciless people kick me around or chase me away. Look at those wicked people. They are knocked down, never to get up again. All right. Thoughts, reactions, comments? Yeah, Natalie.
All right, I'm a little bit offended by this psalm. It seems if you don't believe in God, then you must be wicked. And that's not true. You could be an atheist and do all the good in the world and still not believe in God. Only if you are a believer will good things happen to you. And that's not true either. You can be a very good person and just not believe in God. And this rejects all that. I mean, Ronald Reagan's son would have no place to go. He doesn't believe in dying and burning in hell just because he doesn't believe in God either. But I love all the good things that are happening to people who love God, but I don't think all these bad things got to happen to someone who doesn't.
All right. So Natalie says, I'm worried about this, about the implication in this psalm that in order to be righteous, you have to have a sense of the dread of God, right? In order to be righteous, you have to have yirah. Without belief in God, then you've lost your ability to be righteous. That doesn't comport with our lived experience. We know people who are perfectly righteous people who do not have a relationship with God, or who do not see themselves as having a relationship with God. And so are we really willing to cast them out? And also, Natalie didn't say this explicitly, but I think, isn't a fundamental teaching of Judaism that if you're a good person, you're okay. We do not believe that that you have to be Jewish to have salvation, that you have to have a particular beliefs in order to get into eternal life. And there is a voice that is represented by this psalm that seems to argue against that. So do other people see that same thing in this psalm? Do other people see that there's a requirement here to believe in God? Larry.
I think the contemporary English version is terrible. I think it loses the sense. I agree, it makes it sound that way, but I like the one you were looking at. If you go back to no, the NIV, it sounds like first that David is prophesying. He has a message from God in his hearts about the sinfulness of the wicked. And it's true there is no fear of God before their eyes. The problem is they don't even know that they're sinning. They don't understand their nature to sin. And that the fear of God, or the lessons of the Tanakh are that your nature may be evil without, here are the rules. If you don't live by these rules of God, then your human nature will inevitably lead you to sin because you don't see it. And the strength of the purpose of the law, the purpose of understanding God, is to understand your smallness and your nature to be like an animal instead of what a human should be. That you see much more in the NIV translation, and I think that paraphrase of the contemporary English version should be just excised. I think that's terrible, and I hate paraphrases anyway. I much prefer the struggling with the real text. Otherwise, you can come to the correct conclusion of that false premise that bad translation made.
All right, so Larry says, I think the problem, Natalie, is not what the psalm says, but the translations.
Yes.
Some of these translations, especially the last one I read, the contemporary English version, which I keep bringing the contemporary English version because I think it helps us to clarify the importance of translation. And there has been several times where folks have felt like they couldn't connect to the psalm, and then they read the contemporary English version, that translation, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, the people in this class, that psalm speaks in a vernacular that is very clear and easy to understand, and it takes away a lot of the complicated metaphors or the challenges in translation, and it streamlines it instead of trying to struggle with, right? So here in this verse, we have one translation here on the screen that says, I know what transgression says to the wicked. And this translation says, I have a message from God in my heart concerning the sinfulness of the wicked, right? So there the word transgression is understood as sinfulness, but the Hebrew seems to say that Pesha itself is talking to the Rasha, Ne'um Pesha, right? Wickedness itself is speaking to the wicked person. Iniquity speaks to the wicked person, right? The Bekarev Libi, in my heart, right? That is it in my heart that wickedness speaks to the wicked person, or is it in my heart that I know that wicked is talking to the wicked person? Wickedness is talking to the wicked person, right? I know what transgression says to the wicked, or maybe it's God is speaking to me in my heart about the sinfulness of the wicked. And if we look at different translations, right? Transgression speaketh to the wicked. Methinks is the in my heart, right? Here, the Koren Jerusalem Bible says transgression speaks to the wicked within his heart. So the Hebrew says Bekarev Libi, within my heart, but that doesn't really make sense. What would make the most sense is to say that transgression is speaking to the wicked in his heart. Like, how can transgression speak to the wicked in my heart if I'm not wicked? Right? If I'm a righteous person, transgression's not speaking to the wicked in my heart. But right, the JPS translation says, I know in my heart what transgression is saying to the wicked. And the reason why I like that translation, aside from the fact that the Hebrew says libi, my heart, so it's more close to the Hebrew, is that I think it sort of implies that the transgression is also murmuring to him, to the psalmist. Like, I know what transgression says to the wicked, because transgression is also saying that to me. I also hear the temptation of sinfulness in my heart. But the difference between me and the sinner, the difference between me and the wicked person, is they don't have a mitigating voice. They don't have a superego, right? Or you might say, in the context of this psalm, they don't have a dread of God. They don't have a sense of Yirat Hashem. They are not. They're not. They're not worried too much about right and wrong. Or Larry said they don't know what's right and what's wrong, right? And maybe that's another way to understand it, right? Transgression whispers to all of us, but the psalmist is able to say, "Oh, that's transgression whispering to me. I know what transgression says to the wicked because I hear it too, but because of my fear of God, I don't have to listen to it." Whereas the wicked who have no fear of God, or who are confused or seduced by what transgression says to them, right? That they're going to hear the words of transgression and think that it's their own ideas, their own thoughts. That they aren't going to be able to tease it apart and realize that transgression is talking to them, right? I know what transgression says to the wicked. They have no sense of the dread of God, because transgressive speech is seductive to them. And the only way that they will realize that what they're doing is wrong is when they get caught and tried, and their wickedness is found out, and they're hated by their fellow human beings. Then they'll realize that transgression is talking to them. But because of my relationship with God, I'm inoculated against that, against the possibility of following down that path, because I have a fear of God. Now, this still goes to Natalie's question. Do we really think that the only way to be inoculated is to have Yirat Hashem? Do we think that the only way to not get confused and think that when transgression speaks to you, it's your own voice, is the only way to do that, to have a relationship with God? I would say no. I don't think that the psalmist is saying that either. I think the psalmist is saying that he himself, the one who writes this psalm, the way that he deals with transgression's voice in his head is by having a relationship with God. But it is not necessarily the case that only people who have a relationship with God are able to withstand the seduction of transgression, of evil. And I'd even say something farther. In my own experience, people who claim to have a relationship with God are just as susceptible to the seduction of transgression than the rest of us. The question is, how do you respond when you hear that voice of transgression inside of you? So to me, I think that leaves the ambiguity more open than the New International Version, which says, I have a message from God about the sinfulness of the wicked, right? God is speaking in my heart about the pesha of the wicked. I actually like the anthropomorphism of transgression, that sinfulness itself is talking to me. Which I think is what the Hebrew ne'um pesha is. Such a weird phrase, right? Ne'um means this is a statement of, like, in prophecy, the word neum often precedes a statement of prophecy, right? Neum Adonai, we would say, right? This is the statement of the Lord. And then Isaiah might say, and here's what the Lord says, right? Or it might come at the end of a sentence, da 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 da, Neum Adonai. Jeremiah might say something and then say, and that's the utterance of the Lord, right? To say Neum Pesha, it is a really different use of that phrase. All right. Beautiful. Other comment. Yeah, Murray.
I like very much the amplification and the different nuances from the words. But my first impression was that these were the words of a true believer who lays out the path for those who do not believe and the wicked. And it says, almost being a paragon, says, here is the way to salvation. That is what one has to do. And I don't think the psalmist in this case necessarily thinks of many of the other aspects which we discussed here, or which were commented on, but really says, this is the way to the Lord.
Henry.
So from the beginning, my mind was on the Hatfields and the McCoys, who you have two different groups thinking the exact same thing, that the other one is wicked. They're both believers. Is there a right and wrong?
Right. I mean, I think we always have to have some humility as folks in relationship with the divine, however we understand God, right? We always have to have humility that our enemies see themselves also as the heroes of their own story and also have a relationship with the divine, however they understand God. And that is, I think that's fair. I think that most people do not wake up thinking, I am evil. My actions are evil. I'm bringing more evil into the world. How can I lie in my bed and plot mischief? Right? I think that most folks do not in and of themselves, or do not think of themselves that they are ones who do not reject evil. Most folks say, yes, I reject evil. The evil is the other side. They are evil. And so I think you're right, Henry, that we always have to have some humility about that. I like to believe that there is some kind of true facts, and that some actions are morally unambiguous. You know, that helps me to make sense of the world. But I agree that, you know, that we always have to have that humility about that other folks also have that same belief, even if their beliefs and our beliefs are not the same. Yeah, Gary.
You you bring up a good point. When they talk about evil, are they talking about eating pork? When they talk about evil, are they talking about killing somebody or stealing? What's the extent of the evil? Are there misdemeanors and are there felonies?
So this is an interesting question. Many of the Psalms that we've looked at so far, right, we're at the 36th Psalm. The Psalms tend not to talk about specific violations of commandments. either murder, either theft, murder, violence, whatever the kinds of, sort of universal moral teachings, right? Or the specific commandments of the Jewish people to God, Shabbat, kashrut, etc. Mostly the Psalms when they talk about evil people, they talk about a lack of integrity, a lack of faith. There's a lot in Psalms about lying and deceit, right? Which is all about the lack of integrity, right? I don't know exactly what to make of that. That is to say, I have to think more about your question. Why, when the psalmist talks about wickedness, does the psalmist not specify exactly what wicked acts the psalmist is decrying, right? This isn't like, when you read Isaiah or Amos and there's a specific litany of sins that the prophet is angry that the Jewish people have done. How dare you trample over the widow? How you're not giving the appropriate amount of money to the orphans, right? You treat the strangers despicably, right? The prophets are not afraid to specifically call out, right? When you go to the temple to offer your sacrifices, you don't really believe it. All of your stuff is in vain, right? Like the prophets really do specifically talk about, specific commandments. My hunch is that there's two things going on. One is that the psalmist is poetry. The psalmists are writing poetry, and so their interest is in the literary. And so what is the worst sin of speech? The worst sin of speech is deceit, deception, lying. And so since this is a medium that is specifically related to speech, that is, writing poetry is about language, the thing that they specifically decry is the sin of language, which is a lack of integrity, lying. So I think that's one aspect of it. I think that there's something where the medium affects the message. And so the message is a specific message against untruthful speech. But the other thing is, I think that the psalmists, like, if there can be said to be some kind of a thesis in a collection of poetry, right? One of the possible thrusts that we have seen is that goodness, and this goes back to what Natalie said right at the beginning, goodness is not about a specific set of actions. Goodness is about integrity, right? What does it mean to be a good person? Like, it means to not tell lies, right? What is it we read in Psalm 15, maybe? Like, what does it take to be admitted to the house of God? It's to speak truth, right? When we say, right, we just a couple of psalms ago, we heard sur me rava seito, right? Stay away from evil and do good, right? The psalmists are interested in the sort of the underlying principle of what makes a good person good. And it isn't about specific actions. It's about the things that underlie those actions. And that's about living a life of integrity, where your speech and your acts are harmonious. If you really believe the things that you say you believe, you will act in a particular way. And I think that's what another aspect of why the psalmist, when the psalmist describes in this psalm what the wickedness is of the wicked, what does it say? Like verse 4, their words are evil and deceitful, right? It does say that they're plotting mischief in their bed, but it doesn't say what mischief it is, because that doesn't matter. What really matters is the that that their speech is lying. Yeah, Natalie.
Thanks, Gary, for bringing that up. I was thinking about that too. This was a psalm written by a Jew for Jews to read. Is there a translation from Christians to this psalm?
The
Yeah.
the New International Version here on the right is a Christian translation, and the King James Version is a Christian translation, and
That's what I was interested in.
and the
King James.
contemporary English version is also a Christian translation. So I bring three. Most weeks I bring three Christian translations. So the King James Version says, "The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart, that there is no fear of God before his eyes. For he flattereth himself in his own eyes until his iniquity be
Excuse me.
found to be hateful. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. He deviseth mischief upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. Thy mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens, and thy faithfulness reacheth unto the clouds. Thy righteousness is like the great mountains. Thy judgments are a great deep. O Lord, thou preservest man and beast. How excellent is thy loving kindness, O God! Therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadow of thy wings. They shall be abundantly satisfied with the fatness of thy house, and thou shalt make them drink of the river of thy pleasures. For with thee is the fountain of life. In thy light we see light. O continue thy loving kindness unto them that know thee, thy righteousness to the upright in heart. Let not the foot of pride come against me, and let not the hand of the wicked remove me. There are the workers of iniquity fallen; they are cast down and shall not be able to rise." So
All right.
that's the King James Version. But the New International Version and the contemporary English version are also Christian translations.
Because I hear so often when there is someone who did some wickedness, oh, he is such a good Christian, he couldn't have done that. And that always meant that if you Christian and believe in God, believe in the Trinity, then you can't do evil. And we know that's not true. So I didn't know if they had more to say about that in the translation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the true life shows us that you can have a very deep relationship with God. You can be a really really good, pastor to your flock, and also be a terrible husband. You can you can have a really deep faith and also defraud the government from taxes. Like there, the the this is what I'm saying about, like, transgression speaks to all of us. We all have the capacity to be tempted by sinfulness. Gary.
Is is this reference also, I guess telling a lie is an action in and of itself. So we're dealing with actions. Loshin hara, things like that. An action in a way,
Yeah.
speaking bad, blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
you're saying that this is focused mostly on the language, not so much the actions.
Well, it's not that it's not focused on the actions. I think that the underlying principle is, if you're a person of integrity, your actions follow your words. That part of what's so terrible about people who do bad actions is that they're also sitting there saying, "But I'm a good person. I believe the right things. I show up to synagogue on Saturday morning," right? And so the, like, compounded on the fact that they do bad stuff is that they're also living a life that is deceitful and without integrity.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And the Psalms do seem to really focus on integrity as sort of this major, like, what separates the righteous from the wicked is that the righteous live a life of integrity and the wicked don't. The wicked practice self-deceit. The wicked practice deceit of others. The wicked do not act in accordance with their speech, but the righteous do. And so, like, obviously there's more to it. The righteous also support the orphans and the widows. The righteous also, practice Shabbat. The righteous also have faith. The righteous, right? There are lots of things, there are lots of positive things that the righteous do, but the righteous are saying that they're doing them and doing them. And the wicked are saying that they're doing them, but really they're doing something else. Larry.
To that point also, I think the Jewish translations have a good answer in verse 12. It's let not the foot of pride overtake me. That is, the other side is let my righteousness, let me not feel so righteousness that I get so proud about it, that it becomes as potentially a danger to me as the wickedness, the actions of the wicked. So guard your own heart. Watch out for pride. That's the killer.
Yeah. Al tivo'eni regel gava, right? Regel gava, the foot of arrogance, the foot of pride, right? Like hopefully that is it a literal foot of the arrogant as is connected to the hand of the wicked, right? So, right, this translation says the foot of the arrogant and the hand of the wicked, because the Hebrew says regel ga'ava and yad rishaim. And so you would think that regel and yad are parallel, okay? Because regel means foot and yad means hand. So you got this phrase. It's two sticks. In the first part, you got an al, like do not, and then tivo'eni, let this thing come onto me. And in the second stick, you have an al, which means do not, and tinideni, which means to push me away, to move me, right? And then you got these two phrases. Yad Rishaim, it's clear what that means. Yad Rishaim is the hand of the wicked. Regel Ga'ava is a confusing phrase because you would think that for this to be parallel, this needs to be referring to some human beings, like the Rishaim refers to some human beings. Or if Gava means pride and not the arrogant, if it means arrogance, then you would want this to be the Yad Risha'a, right? You would want this to be the hand of evil, not the hand of the wicked people. And so the Hebrew is unsatisfying in it's not a perfect parallel. But I think the translations that are the best translations are the ones that try to find a way to, instead of to imposing a parallel onto it, that try to find a way to preserve the ambiguity of the Hebrew. That one half of this phrase is has a that it's not a perfect parallel. So here, this translation, let not the foot of pride overtake me, and let not the hand of the wicked drive me away. So there you can see that the foot of pride is, right, pride itself, not the foot of the prideful, and the hand of the wicked, that's, so that translation preserves the confusingness of that phrase. So I do prefer when it tries to at least to keep it. So here this translation went the other way. Instead of the wicked being the wicked people, now this is like the wicked hand, meaning the hand of wickedness. But the way that and here it's the foot of pride, right? Or the proud foot, right? The proud foot and the wicked hand. It's the other the other possibility. We look, the first translation up here says, okay, the foot of the arrogant and the hand of the wicked, or the proud foot and the wicked hand, right? There are two possible ways to massage the translation so that it feels more parallel. But the middle one here, the old JPS translation, doesn't try to do that. It leaves the ambiguity present. All right, I wanted to talk about this this idea of the Kimcha Mekor Chaim. God is the source of life, the fountain of life, and in God's light we see light. So I brought a couple of a couple of commentaries. Steinzold says, "For the source of life is with you, and those who are close to you benefit from that life. Through your light, we see light." Steinzold says, "Closeness to God provides one with a sense of satisfaction and enlightenment." So what does it mean to see light in God's light? It means that relationship with God, closeness to God, gives you a sense of enlightenment, right? It's an intellectual aspect. But the Talmud says, the Talmud has this nice commentary on verse 10, that the Talmud says, "Righteousness and justice are found in heaven, as it is written, righteousness and justice are the base of your throne. Righteous giving, tzedakah, is found in heaven, as it is written, God dons tzedakah like a coat of mail," right? "The treasuries of life are found in heaven, as it is written, with you is the fountain of life. And the treasuries of peace are found in heaven, as it is written, so Gideon built there an altar to God and called it Adonai Shalom, God of peace." So the Talmud is talking about aspects of the divine that are found in heaven. What does it mean that that God is the fountain of life? In your light we see light. It's that that life is found in heaven, in relationship with God. It's I think an interesting aspect. All right. This psalm is not used very much in our liturgical tradition, which you probably recognized, since you probably didn't recognize very much of the psalm. There is this verse, Tzidkatka kahare el mishpatecha teom rabah, Adamu ve'ema toshi Adonai, verse 7, is used in a series of 3 verses that all start with the word tzidkatka, your righteousness. So, and we use that in the Shabbat afternoon service. It's the only time that we use this particular 3-verse anthology. And and verses 8 to 11 are used as a meditation for putting on the talis in the morning. So we say, "Asher kichanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu lehita teif batzitzit." We say, God who has instructed us to enwrap ourselves with the tzitzit, and then you wrap yourself up, and as you hold the tzitzit around your head, before you place it on your shoulders, it's customary to recite the last word, the verses 8 through 11. Ma yakar chastecha Elohim uvnei adam betzel knafecha yechasayun yirviyun mideshen beitecha v'nachal adonecha tashkem kimcha mekor chayim b'orcha nir or v'shol chastecha liyodecha v'tzidkatcha lishrei lev. So if you're custom to do that, I think the idea is that the talis itself is symbolic of being embraced in the shadow of God's wings. That by doing mitzvot, and specifically by putting on the talit, which has that sense of being wrapped up or held or embraced, that you are being covered by or embraced by God, by the shadow of God's protection, God's shelter, God's wings. And so the talus itself becomes the wing of God. And through that being, that sense of being connected to God's to God's sheltering presence, there's also a sense of enlightenment, a sense of connection, a sense of being embraced by the fountain of life. That the mitzvot themselves are connected to that fountain of life, right? This psalm has a response. What do we do to make sure that we are what do we do to make sure that we are able to discern the temptation of sin and to discern that voice from the divine voices? How can we see ourselves in response to that temptation? One way is to not just to do the mitzvot, but to see the mitzvot as a source of a connection with God. Now, Natalie, you started us off today by talking about the challenge of belief in God and the way that this psalm seems to require it for a good life or for righteousness. And Rabbi Levi also picks up on that same question. Would you like to read for us this comment?
This psalm suggests an antidote to the times when we are tempted to give in to selfishness, arrogance, cruelty, or even more egregious wrongs. It first suggests that we need to keep Pachad Adonai, the fear of God, in front of our eyes, difficult for many of us to do because we are not sure that God should be feared or that we would be punished for the wrong acts we would commit. But then it suggests a source for this pachad, an awareness of the vastness of heaven, of the commanding presence of the high mountains, the power of the great deeps. As immovable as those natural forces are, so are the qualities of the God who created them. Love of those bound to God in covenant faithfulness to fulfill the terms of the covenant, the ultimate rule of justice, and its manifestation in the judgments we experience on earth. I just lost it.
Okay. When we feel tempted to act in rebellion against God, we can look at the sky, climb to the summit of the mountain, dive into the depths of the sea, and there take refuge in the surrounding love God has provided.
In nature and in our interactions with human beings, when clouds veil the sun, we can renew our awareness of how much light fills the world. And when the sun reappears, we can remind ourselves that the light we see is the reflection of the light of God. When injustice obscures the rule of law in the world, we can be goaded by the light of God to work for justice and help bring the peaks of God's promise into clear view for all.
What do you think?
I think that translations and comments make it easier to understand. Since I don't translate Hebrew, you have to rely on what the translations, the English translations say, and you have to be careful of which translations you get because they could be so different from one another.
Yeah, and we looked today, we really leaned into this, comparative translations piece. We saw that different translations are responding to some of the ambiguities in the Hebrew in different ways. And even for somebody who understands Hebrew like I do, having comparative translations helps me to note where I'm being confused by the Hebrew. You know, I if I just read it in Hebrew, I would understand it sort of. I would understand the sense of it, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to say, oh, this phrase is particularly hard to understand. But when I look at 6 different translations and they all understand that verse differently, and I'm able to say, oh, and here's exactly what in the verse is difficult about that. So it helps me too. You know, I hadn't thought about the Ne'um Pesha, that this is a statement of iniquity itself, a statement of transgression. Does transgression speak to us? Does God speak to us about transgression, right? All of those possible ways to translate it. And the frustration that translators must have when a sentence is almost perfectly parallel, but then there's a verb in one place and a noun in the other place. And they're like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? How do I translate the verb as a verb and the noun as a noun? How do I understand this is, and I think is very, yeah. I think that Richard Levy here, he really gets to the core point of that you immediately realized when we first read the psalm, which is it's very challenging for us to hear, as moderns, as 21st century people, as post-Holocaust people. It's challenging for us to hear, just fear God. That's the answer to this question of righteousness. But when you read his whole explanation and how he explains, like, what is the psalmist actually is giving us a sense of what the source of that pachad is, and is giving us a sense for the way in which that is representative of God's love, God's deep covenantal love, God's faithfulness to us, as God's desire to be in relationship. When we're tempted to feel distant from God, we can watch the sun go behind the clouds and feel that sense of, oh, all light is reflected God's light, and that can be incredibly moving and powerful. Any last thoughts?
It's like having an eclipse every day.
Yeah.
The sun is hidden as a metaphor for God, and then it shows itself again.
Amen. Well, we'll close out with another of these psalm songs. These are not meant to be translations. These are modern poems that are based on the sort of essence of the psalm. And I like them, but I'm not bringing them as, in the class, because on the source sheet, because they're not translations. And she's not trying to do a translation. She's doing what is clearly an interpretation. 36. When sinning dictates to my heart of hearts, be brave and stay the course. No one is watching. Schemes I plan at night in bed come easy, slick. But God in clouded distance reigns and judges all, shows mercy undeserved to man and even beast. And in this knowledge I find comfort. I can hide beneath your wings, find cover in the gentle mercy, always there beneath your wings, and find there light, and air to breathe, and water for my soul to be reclaimed from prideful, lawless power. Easy, oh, so easy in my hands.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. See you next week.
Thank
Hey,
you.
thank you, Rabbi.
Psalm 37 is really long, so read it in advance too.
Bye all.
You want to go vote?
Hmm?
Go vote?